cancel your next interview. We're going to talk for another hour. But anyway, here's the thing. I love talking about this. So she came to me. She goes, what's the problem? What are you upset about? I said, nothing's wrong. She said, no, really, what's the deal? Because you're aggravated about something. I said, well, I did this and I did this and I did this. You didn't even notice. You didn't even say anything about it. She said, are you doing that for the recognition, or are you doing that because I need the help? And we got to be careful of our motives. Well, Dave Ramsey sits on my right, and he sold millions and millions of copies of books. Dan Miller sits across the table from me, millions and millions of books. And I'm thinking, who's going to read my book? And Dan Miller said, that's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say. And I wanted to poke him in the eye. I'm like, what are you talking about? We need to be goofy. We need to act silly. We wrestle in the floor, whatever. It's just be fun. You got to keep putting deposits in. You can't just make a deposit, then a withdrawal. You got to keep putting deposits in.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too.
I would love for you to just introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Aaron Walker. I'm president and founder of View from the Top. I'm a premier life and business coach. We help ordinary men become extraordinary. That's kind of what we do each and every day. To give you just a little backstory, if I could, I'm a native Nashvilleian, so grew up in Nashville. Opened my first business when I was 18 years old. I started working for a guy when I was 13. When I was 18, I found a couple of guys that had a lot of money because I didn't have any, and I mean like zero. We formed a partnership and we grew our business to a decent size, and we sold it to a Fortune 500 when I was 27. So I went from no money at 18 to retired at 27. And I thought, this is the American dream. This is so cool. Until my wife woke me up from a nap one day and she said, this is not what I signed up for. You're getting in the bed in the middle of the day, taking a nap. You're depressed, you're bored, and you've gained 50 pounds, not to mention you're getting fat. And so I said, all right, she said, you need to go back to work or you need to start another business. And I did. I went back, bought the company I started with. We grew it for 10 years and it was very successful. And then I retired again. Robin said, I've retired more than the law allows. But the reason that I retired is because a very devastating thing happened to me in 2001. I ran over and killed a pedestrian when I was 40 years old. We decided to sell the business, and we did. Took 5 years off. We traveled all over the world, kind of got my legs back under me. She said, okay, you're getting fat and lazy again. It's time to go back to work. So I did. When the construction industry, we took that to number one 3 consecutive years here in Middle Tennessee. The third and final time, I retired at 50. And some of my mastermind members, Dave Ramsey, Dan Miller, Ken Abraham, Jeff Mosley, some of those guys that we've been meeting for a long time in Dave's office, they said, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm finished. I'm going to go down to the Caribbean. I'm going to sit on the front porch of one of those little tiki huts, and I'm going to enjoy life. And Dan Miller said, that's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say. And I wanted to poke him in the eye. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been working since I was 13. Now I'm 50. I'm ready to retire. He said, Aaron, you've owned so many businesses, and you and Robin have had a 30-plus year successful marriage. You need to train other men how to do that. So I prayed about it and thought about it, agreed to do it. Dave gave me Entree Leadership Mastery to come and try it. I did. I loved it. Dan said, come do Innovate. I loved it. And they said, you need to start coaching. I started coaching, and that birthed View from the Top. And now we have over 100 men in our community. We're in 6 different countries, and I get to help ordinary men become extraordinary each and every day. So that's what we do.
That is amazing.
That's awesome. What a story that you can go through all that, be successful at it, and now share and equip other men who's going to influence their families to do so good a work. So can you tell me a little bit about? So you and Robin have been married over 30 years, almost 40 years. What kind of tips or things have you found to be the most important over the years? And of course they change, but what's
Sure.
some like key things?
Well, here's the thing. In pre-interview chat, we talked about I'm a person of faith, and so I'm a Christian. And so that is Robin and I's common denominator. And we've reached impasses many times. Robin is a very soft-spoken person. She's much behind the scenes. She's got a servant's heart. She doesn't care anything about fanfare or being out front. She loves being a mom. She loves being a grandmom. She just absolutely is thrilled to stay at home, and she has our entire marriage, 38 years now. She's taken care of our children. I've gone out and been the entrepreneur. And the bigger problem that we've probably had along those lines is her feeling like she didn't contribute as much because she didn't bring a check home.
Mm-hmm.
And it took years for me to convince her how important her role and responsibilities were. And that took a great amount of communication. I'm a big picture guy. I'm very dominant. I'm a high D on the disc profile. I don't care anything about the details. I don't care how to build the watch. I just want to know what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me the big, broad overview. That's all I need. I don't need chit chat. I don't need to know all the details. Well, that's caused a real conflict in our marriage because Robin's very detailed oriented. She wants to know exactly how my day goes, what I did, what I had for lunch, who I talked to. And I'm like, okay. So it took us a few years to work through that because I didn't want to come home and do that. Well, Robin wanted to be a part of my life, right? She wanted to be a part of the business. So it takes a lot of discipline. Two things had to happen. One, I had to give more details. And second of all, she couldn't ask as much, right? She had to respect me also. Like those details wear me out. And so she had to control the amount. So she's learned over the years what to ask me. And I've learned over the years the level of detail to make her happy, right? So that we have good communication. So I would just say one thing, and I would do this quite honestly for young couples, you need to take a disc profile. Because oftentimes there's things that are going on in your marriage that you could resolve by understanding your personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding those things, so the disc profile can be huge in that. That's the first tip. The second tip is over the course of our marriage, we've prayed together, not daily, not every month, every week, but over the course of our marriage, we've prayed together. That levels the playing field, right? When you go before the Lord, it levels the playing field. And so then you can't have a facade. You can't have your way. And you've got to be willing to give. Adam Grant wrote a great book, and it's called Give and Take. And we need to give more than we take, right? And the needs are different. Like Robin's love language is spending time. Mine are words of affirmation. I like for her to affirm me. So if you can learn each other's love language and what they need, I don't need Robin to do certain things for me, but there's other things I need. So finding out what those needs are and being honest. Those are three things that I think if you'll do, that this profile, learning what each other's needs are and be willing to give more than you take. I'll tell you, and I don't know how much or how detailed you want to go, but I do want to tell a couple of stories because my needing words of affirmation caused a hiccup in our marriage early on because I would do things around the house or I would do things outside. And because I liked words of affirmation, I wanted Robin to recognize it, right? So years and years ago, Robin called me out on that is I did something and she didn't notice it. So she came to me, she goes, what's the problem? What are you upset about? I said, nothing's wrong. She said, no, really, what's the deal? Because you're aggravated about something. I said, well, I did this and I did this and I did this. And you didn't even notice. You didn't even say anything about it. She said, are you doing that for the recognition or are you doing that because I need the help?
Mm-hmm.
And the truth was I was doing it for the recognition. I wasn't doing it because she needed the help. And we got to be careful of our motives. And so now I don't tell her anything that I do. And it's amazing how much more she recognizes.
Mm.
So I think we've got to have our motivations have got to be pure.
Mm-hmm. I like the love languages a lot. We've gone through the love languages, and I've also used them with my clients. And I think one thing that the book warns about is sometimes we work out of the language that we do best. And me and Melanie went through a big thing of that because I was always trying to, do things for her and give her things and this and she's like, well, she doesn't care about those things. So my motivation was the wrong motivation. And I think as we've been married, it's just the years kind of pile up. It's really important that we know ourselves before. So the whole idea of not so much what your identity is, but like who are you, how do you work, what works best for you,
having like a strong self-awareness
and having
taken the time to investigate what your motives are, and if really investigating yourself, I guess, is a huge
Yeah, so
part of
knowing yourself through the
yeah.
DISC profile or other personality tests or
Kind of an introspection, right? It's
Yes.
looking inward, right? Right.
Yeah, and one of the things that came to my mind when you were telling your story was we have had couples come up to us, and it's always the young, like newlyweds, 3 months married, and they will say things like, "Well, my husband just doesn't meet my needs." And so I would be interested to pass that idea on to you and just get your take on what you even think that means. I know that's a funny
Yeah,
thing
well,
to do, but I'd like to know what you think.
yeah. I wrote some curriculum years ago that we pass out to the men, and it's called personal assessment. And then I wrote another one called What Do I Want? And they're very specific questions. We all have needs, right? So let's be honest with that, first of all. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, I just want to serve you." Well, that's true to a point, but we all have needs. There's physical needs, there's emotional needs, there's spiritual needs, there's things that we need, that we desire. And we have got those because we have different life experiences. Like Robin was raised a certain way with certain top parents. I was raised, so I see things differently. I was raised in an environment where I had a dad that was very similar to me, very high domineering kind of guy. It's the way I was raised, the way I saw it. Robin was raised in a single parent situation. Her dad was absent. And so she had different paradigms, that she lived by and different perspectives. And we had to work through that. And so I had to learn what her needs were. And there were many times that, quite honestly, early in our marriage, I don't think this would embarrass her, but early in our marriage, it was almost a father figure because she didn't have a father figure. And I'm like, I don't want to be your dad, right? I want to be your husband. And we had to work through that. And there were other times where she would say things to me and I would say back kind of harsh a little bit. I didn't think it was harsh at all because she had never heard that dialogue between her parents. My parents would have that dialogue, and that was the way I learned to interact. So we had to learn through our communication skills. And so her needs were different because she was raised in a single parent environment. And so we had to work through that. But I think it's just being conscious of the environment because we're a product of our environment, right? Different filters and different situations. So I think you have to be honest about your needs. The other thing is that was difficult in the early stages of our marriage was really expressing what our needs were. And so different people have different needs for different reasons. And there's some things that you're just like, this is who I am and this is what I need. And it's not like, I don't know what you said, but I know what I heard, right? And you've got to get by that oftentimes. Robin could say things and make an inflection in her voice, and it would totally be something that I wasn't expecting. And I would probe deeper and find out that's not what she meant at all. And so I think it's just discovery, figuring out the way they're saying it, what they mean exactly. Oftentimes it's the things you don't say, right? And so, for example, Robin recently had a girlfriend that there was a little bit of a conflict, and I said, just call her and tell her. And she said, I'm not going to call her and tell her because if it's important enough to her, she would ask. Well, see, I don't think that way. I think like, well, I wouldn't even know to ask. And so I wrote a little document on that. It's a spouse survey, actually, and it's the questions that you don't know to ask. And so there's a 25 question survey that I created that ask their spouse things that give them insight that we don't know to ask.
Is that in a program, or is that just something that people could access?
I'll give it to your audience. How's that? You can get it at viewfromthetop.com/spouse survey.
That's amazing. Yeah,
So
that
free,
sounds wonderful.
Free for your audience.
Thank you.
Really.
Yeah, what I was going to say is when you were telling that story is we have gotten to the point, because Seth is a therapist and he has like therapeutic intervention resources at his disposal. We just recently got to the point where and this took a lot of sort of self-awareness and digging into our relationship, but we often misunderstand one another. And our intentions are so good. Like we're trying to come closer together and, raise kids well and blah, blah, blah. But we cannot communicate to save our lives. We just don't. I mean, I communicate and he takes it the wrong way, and he says something and I take it the wrong way. So we have actually started using, it's a worksheet, and it's called the clearing structures. And it's all about it's like I statements. It kind of gives you ownership of
Right.
when you do this thing, I feel this thing, and what I really want was this other thing. And I mean, we actually have to use a worksheet instead of talking. And it changes everything. It makes us so much happier and kinder, and we understand what the other one was saying, but it doesn't seem, it's not fun, but it's important, you know?
Well, yeah, everything in your marriage is not fun, but it's worth it. And if that's the way you communicate best and that's what works for you, then that's certainly what you should do.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you're sharing your resources, so too. That's really, I'm excited
Yeah.
about
Yeah, thank you. And
Yes.
in part of your book, you talk about Carol Dweck and the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I think that idea in anything from entrepreneurship or just attacking goals, and especially in a marriage, you have to have a growth mindset. So
Sure.
can you speak a little bit how the growth mindset has worked for you in your marriage?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, I can't always say we were on the same page there either, because my whole family's been entrepreneurs for 3 generations back. Robin was raised in an environment where her dad was an employee of a company, before she lost her dad. And so their mindset was totally different in regards to the way they look at things. And it was just not to belittle anyone's mindset, but what I'm saying is there is a big difference in a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. My mom had a saying when I was a child: can't, couldn't do it, and could did it all. And I developed a growth mindset as a result of that. And we talked about fear. People are afraid, and we say fear missing an opportunity more than you fear failure. And I think a lot of the things is the way you're raised, right? It's ingrained, it's inbred in you, the environment that you're around. That's why Jim Rohn says we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. We learn those things. Well, Carol Dweck makes a great point in her book in how to have a growth mindset. People with fixed mindsets can elect to have a growth mindset if they choose. Oftentimes, people don't choose to do that. But early in our marriage, I was, hey, we can do anything. We can set the world on fire. We can do whatever. And quite honestly, not to my credit, but because of that mindset, we were successful early on, because I believed I could. If, enough time and enough hard work, we could do it. It wasn't, oh, the little guy can never get ahead. We can never have this, and we'll always be right here. It's like, I just refuse to believe that. And I refuse to believe that today. What they're saying is you can't do that. When they say you can't, it's like what they mean is they can't do it, is what they're saying. And so the book really points that out. And it's just the way we look at things, whether your glass is half full or half empty. My glass is always half full. And I think it's just the perspective by which we look at everything, you can develop a growth mindset. So I would say get that out on the table early in your marriage and see if you have 2 different opposing mindsets, and try to work to the center to where you can nurture one along as well as the other. This brings up an interesting point that I'm seeing over and over in our community now, because we do mastermind groups. We have 11 mastermind groups that we facilitate. And I'm seeing, and we just do men, nothing against women at all. We're making women your men good.
Yeah.
Good husbands, good dads, good business people. Nothing against women whatsoever. It's just the niche that I've elected to go down. But here's what we're discovering after 4 years of mastermind is a lot of the wives are becoming a little envious and jealous of the personal development that their husband is experiencing. And we got to be careful with that. And so recently we've had a woman come on, and she's going to be doing masterminds for the women so that the personal development stays in tandem, right? So one doesn't outpace the other. And so you got to be careful, because you'll have different wavelengths along the way. If one is really growing in personal development, accountability, a growth mindset, and your spouse is not keeping up, whichever way it is.
Yeah.
And so you want to be sure that you're educating yourselves together, right?
That makes
that
me
will help with that mindset.
Yeah.
That makes me think of that saying, the tide rises all boats. Like if I'm winning, then my wife ends up winning. But that is very. I like that you're aware. Like if I'm going to a mastermind, or if I'm going to the gym and doing all this, great self-awareness stuff and improving my life, and my wife feels like, she's not getting a piece of that pie or whatever, that would cause tension. So I agree with the tide rises all ships, but I also believe it is very important to have that be equal, or okay, what can we
Right.
do for you,
Sure.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
So
I would be interested in just sort of your take on what you think happens when couples or individuals don't have a growth mindset, just to kind of paint the picture for listeners.
Yeah, it'll cause some conflict and pretty strong conflict down the road, quite honestly. If you're both fixed mindset, God bless you. You're gonna have some work. You need to have a growth mindset, right? If you're gonna grow your family, grow your marriage, grow your business, whatever. And Robin and I've even gone to a counselor. Not just when things are bad, we go when things are good because I want to be sure I'm not missing something. I'll go, Robin will go, we'll go together, to get on the same page. Robin is more risk averse than I am. And see, women, want security, they want safety, they want to protect the nest, and that's just what God gave them, and that's good. I'm like, hey, I'm rolling the dice. We're going out here, we're going to go for it. And Robin's like, hold on a minute, let's don't roll the dice, let's don't bet the farm, don't put it all on red.
yeah.
I mean, let's carve out. And here's what we've been able to do, and we've seen to be very successful, because oftentimes people either elect not to have a growth mindset or they just refuse. They're just the way they are and they're selfish and they don't want to change. And here's what you can do. You can agree on a percentage of your net worth or your income. And you can say, I'm not going to bet the farm, but 20% of our gross income, we're going to set aside for more adventure or more growth opportunities. And you only have to split it up one time, because if you grow, 20% of that is 20%, regardless. It's not a dollar amount. You can make them feel safe. And, we've done things that financially I could have done that would have probably been smarter financially, but like paying the house off, that gives Robin a real sense of contentment and safety. And I'll tell you a quick story. We bought 11 acres out on a street in Nashville called Licton Pike, and we were setting up on top of it on a blanket. And we were newly married. We hadn't been married long. We were going to build a house. It was about 5 years into our marriage, I guess. And we were going to build a house, and we're sitting up there, and it was beautiful. Our youngest daughter was playing. She was flying a little kite. She was only a couple of years old. And Robin looked at me and she said, I hope we never lose this. Well, something happened in me that day. I don't know what happened exactly, but I said, I'm going to work as hard as I can, as fast as I can, to get this paid for, to set it aside, to not make it something that there's a possibility for her to lose it, because it's that important to her. Well, I could have taken the equity out and bought more businesses or whatever, but that was important to her. And I wanted to be sure she had that safety. I think that's where it goes back to having the love and passion for your mate. It maybe is not what I would have done for myself necessarily, but we stood on a platform and made a covenant before God to serve each other and to nurture each other and to help each other. And for me to be selfish and make her fearful or wearisome about something that was important to her would have been extremely selfish from my perspective. And I think we've got to weigh every decision that way. And Robin is just the opposite. She knows I like to go for it. We're on our 15th business right now. The View from the Top is our 15th business. And she knows that that's the way I am. I'm a 3 to 5 year guy. I love to grow them. I'm a creator developer. I'm not a maintainer manager. I build businesses to sell. That's just what I've always done, and I've done it now 14 times. Well, actually, we've got 13, 14, and 15 in the hopper right now, but the 12 previous we built and sold, and that's what we like to do. But I wanted her to feel safe, and I wanted her to feel secure. She, on the other hand, says, hey, I know you want to go for it. It's about time. I know. Let's go for it. So she encourages me. She's my biggest advocate because I'm respectful of her. See, that's the point. If I was selfish, all about me, she wouldn't be that way. So it's a reciprocal thing for both of us.
We were just talking to a rabbi this morning for an interview, and some of the things that he said were amazing. He said sometimes men and women come into trouble in marriages when they're not acting like a husband and a wife, because the designation of a husband's responsibility is so different from just a man's responsibility. Of course, I'm still a man, and I'm also a husband, but as I continue to mature and grow in my husband role, it supports, it loves, it nurtures, it cares
Right.
for my wife. And anytime that
Sure.
we act out as a man and a woman, that's when we have the conflict. So
And in a marriage and not as a husband and a wife.
in a marriage, yeah. And I think that
Mhm.
decision that you made up on that hill with that blanket, that was a husband move. You saw, this is
Right.
what my wife wants. This is how I can
Right.
serve my wife. And that's just beautiful. Insights like that in a marriage are things that, I mean, I guarantee you that choice has pulled you through a lot of stuff over those 38 years.
You know what happens though, quite honestly, Seth, is it's not a like one time and you're good. It's
Mhm.
like we're selfish by nature and we have to keep giving that up. It's
Mhm.
constant communication, it's constant uh, looking for each other's needs and desires. And I'm selfish by nature, and that creeps back in. And Robin will go, "Oh, well, what is that? Where's that coming from?" And it takes a lot of dialogue. The problem is we sweep it under the rug,
Mhm.
and then it festers, and we don't talk about it. And then one day your mate blows up, and you're like, "Where in the world did this come from?" Well, it's been festering for years, and you haven't had the courage to talk about it. So Robin and I regularly sit in our sunroom and we talk. And I'm like, "Hey, is there something going on?" Or, we argue like we're talking right now. I refuse to holler and yell and slam doors. And no, I can't say that my voice hadn't elevated. It has. But the point is normally I say things I don't mean, and you still have the scar. You can say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it," but that scar is still there. So we got to be very careful. So we can't allow ourselves to get in those fits of rage to say things, because it takes a lot longer to resolve it. And then you've really created a scar.
Mhm.
And so it's just constant communication and hearing each other to have that kind of dialogue.
Yeah. That makes me sort of think of the idea of how we could be preparing people who aren't married yet, people who are dating and engaged. And what would that look like? These ideas that we're talking about, what advice could we give to people who are just coming together? You know?
Yeah, they're going to say, the people listening to this are going to go, "Oh, I don't need that. I'm good." But the truth is that I wished we had done more premarital counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's bad. Robin and I have had an amazing relationship. I mean, it's been incredible. I mean, we've been together literally since she was 16. I was 17. And so I'll be 57, next month. So we've been together, a long time. But I wish that we had gone to more premarital counseling that could have prepared us for some of these things. We worked through it, and we were too stubborn to get a divorce. We were like, "No, we've committed. We're going to hang in there. We're going to do this." But with more coaching and counseling, it would have served us better.
Mm-hmm.
Although we do that now so that we don't miss anything. And as our platform grows, there's other things that come up. I have to speak and I go away, and that's a little bit of a challenge, and I have to work through that. There's boundaries that we've built now because I travel. There's certain things that I will and will not do. And so we've built real strong boundaries. But I think early out of the gate, if people would do that more, one of the bigger challenges, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I think what people don't realize is how much you're marrying the family.
Mm.
And that has caused some real struggles, because I've got some nut cases in my family, and so does Robin, right?
Mhm.
But you're marrying the whole package, right?
Mhm.
And so you've got to learn to deal with mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and crazy siblings and nutcase cousins, and because you're coming together that's a challenge. It's hard, because I'm like, "Man, I don't even want to fool with that guy." Or Robin goes, "I don't even want to fool with this person." Well, we need some help with those kind of things. And we didn't see that coming either. We thought, "Oh, here we are, 2 weeks out of high school, we're going to get married. Everything's good." We didn't consider some of these things. The other thing is really finances cause a bigger burden in young marriages than people realize. And if you don't really work through that, that's a real hurdle to overcome. See, getting to know each other is a hurdle the first 2 or 3 years. But
Mhm.
when you throw financial difficulties on top of that, it really, really inflames the communication problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just being honest with these things and more mature and more premarital coaching would
Yeah.
help.
Can you speak to a little bit about how important community is in marriage? For us, it was vital.
Yeah.
It still is, and we're trying
Sure.
constantly to build that. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important ingredients you could possibly have, but It's diametrically opposed to what we want to do. We want to recoil. We want to get everybody out of our lives. The enemy to excellence is isolation. And if you really want your life to go to the next level, you have to have community. God created us to be in community. And here's the thing, you may be on opposite pages, but if you have trusted advisors that are non-biased, that can come around you and help you and look at it objectively, and say, well, hold on, let's think through this and talk through it. That's helped Robin and I so much because, listen, you've been married 40 years almost. You're going to go through ebbs and flows. There's going to be valleys. There's going to be mountaintops. It's just the way it is. Life just deals us different hands. But our friends have always been able to come around us. Jim Rohn says you're the average, right, of those people. And I want to have people around me giving me great godly advice and help, because you get angry when you're mad and you may say things and you're like, hold on, time out. This is not the way you live normally, and we're not going to allow you to do that. We have about a dozen couples that we do life with. We know a lot of people. We have a pretty good sized platform, but I have about a dozen intimate couples that we are in connect group, small group together over a dozen years. We've been rotating through each other's house. We meet for accountability every Friday, and doing that 10 or 12 years. We vacation together. We're at each other's home playing cards. We just got back from Israel together, all these couples. It's just the way we roll. It's just, you've got to have those people. And transparency comes at different levels with different people. But the sooner you can get that veil down, that unauthentic wall down, that facade that we have in front of a group of people that you trust, the better off and the more concrete your marriage is going to be, because these people can help you. There's no way I would not have a strong community ever, because it's paramount for the success of your marriage.
It is so very important. Can you speak to how? So we're working on a mastermind group for marriage right now that goes along with our podcast and our platform. What's the difference between a mastermind group and the community? Because I know that those 12 couples, you don't consider that a mastermind, I'm assuming.
No.
So
No.
what's the difference there?
Yeah, the community is for each other, for the couples. The mastermind for us, it's all men, and so we have a very regimented schedule. It's thematic. We have books that we read every single month. We have an accountability questionnaire. There's 10 things that you rank yourself every single week on, like what kind of husband are you? What kind of dad? Are you paying your debt down? Are you saving money? Are you reading the book? Are you exercising? Are you dieting? Are you communicating in the community that we have? So every week you rank yourself in this accountability tool. We're very transparent. I'm very transparent to those guys that are in that group. Very vulnerable. I tell them how it is. I tell them when we fight. I tell them when things are not going well, when we've reached this impasse. The hardships that I've had. I mentioned earlier in the interview that I ran over and killed a pedestrian when I was 40 years old. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, obviously, for about 5 years. You don't get over that. God gives you the grace to learn how to deal with it. You don't run over and kill somebody's dad or their husband and get over it. Well, if I didn't have community, if I didn't have those men in my life that walked me through that, I'd be in the fetal position under my desk right now, and I would say life is not worth living because I ran over and killed somebody. And you're like, you got to live with that. These people coached us through it. They helped us with that. I'm transparent to that group, and I help them with that in the mastermind group. We call people out. Like in a minute, we just got off a call before this interview, and I told one guy, I said, you need to bring your hind end to Nashville for our live event if you had a hind end, because this guy just chewed both sides off.
Oh, man.
And so it was serious. It's hardcore stuff, and you can't always do that in mixed company in that kind of community. You can do that one-on-one oftentimes. You can do it when it's gender specific. You can do it sometimes in marriage situations. You can't always be that vulnerable and transparent because people are very reserved for being transparent and authentic in front of someone else's mate. And so that's the difference in the mastermind group being gender specific versus being in community with other couples. I got in the car with Chris Freeman, a friend of mine that's in my in my accountability group. And we were headed to the gym. We were going to work out. And he said, I would hate to be married to you. I started laughing. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you're 180 miles per hour nonstop. He said, I feel sorry for Robin. He said, I'm just going to be honest. He wasn't laughing. And I'm like, what are you saying? He said, dude, you need to slow down sometimes and just relax and take a chill pill and sit there on the couch with her and y'all watch a movie and drink some tea and hang out. And he said, you're go, go, go. And I've been that way for literally 40 years. I've been that's just the way I roll. And so, and he said, you need to think through that. He called me out. He just said, I just don't think that's going to serve you well long term. They're around us all the time. We're together all the time, literally weekly, we're together. And so it really made me think about it. And I'm like, maybe I do need to do that. I have to take a deep breath, close up everything, set it aside, and sit there and watch whatever movie, we're going to watch. If you didn't have community, it may cause me a problem later. And that's the beauty of having these close relationships. Community is a must.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What would you say that in marriage, what does a view from the top look like in marriage?
Well, I don't think you ever get to the top, ever. We call this view from the top, and people say, why? I said, because nobody wants a view from the bottom, right? You have to determine for yourself what that is. I would say Robin and I have a pretty good view because we've been very intentional. We've lived our lives proactively, not reactively. We plan very specifically. We have goals together, and we even take our iPad and we'll say, hey, this year we're going to do this. We're going to go to these places. We want to invest money in this. We want to pay for this, or whatever it is, for our kids or our grandkids. We want to leave a legacy because that's important to us. It's even scriptural. It talks about leaving an inheritance, and we want to do that. So it's very intentional for us. And so we plan deliberately. So for us, that is kind of a view from the top. Now, everybody listening to this may not be in a position to where you can do some of the things that I'm doing. And I may not be in a place where, Seth, you and Melanie, I can do the things y'all are doing. The place we get in trouble is the comparison. I know in the mastermind group, Ken Abraham sits to my left. I wanted to write a book. And I started thinking through that. Ken Abraham sits to my left in that group. He's written 115 books.
Wow.
So he's very, very accomplished. He's written a lot of people. I could call their names. You would recognize them. And he's written their book. Well, Dave Ramsey sits on my right, and he sold millions and millions of copies of books. Dan Miller sits across the table from me, millions and millions of books. And I'm thinking, who's going to read my book? Right? One book. Who's going to read Big A's book? And Ken Davis, that wrote Fully Alive, asked me one day, he said, Abram, when I wrote Fully Alive, he's in a mastermind group I was in, and he said 17 people didn't commit suicide as a result of reading my book, Fully Alive. Would it not be worth to you if one person's life changes as a result of your book being written? And I said, you're daggum right. See, I was comparing the wrong thing, right? And we get in trouble with our marriages doing that, right? It's like your view from the top may be this 4,000 square foot house on the lake. Your husband can't do it. Your wife can't do it right now, but your friends are doing it. And you're like, what about them? How are they doing this? See, that comparison thing will wreak havoc on your marriage. You can never be comparing yourself. Don't compare your beginning to my middle, right? And so I just want to caution people to be careful to do that. Develop your own view from the top and work very, very diligently on accomplishing the goals that y'all have established for your marriage. Keep those within the boundaries and the confines of your home and not comparing it to other people.
That makes me think of several things. One is in your book you talk, or you reference, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he says you should be an inch wide and a mile deep. And that
Greg McCowan, it was in a book, Essentialism was the name of the book. But that's what happens. We're an inch deep and a mile wide. We're trying to do 15 things, and we're never good at any of them. And in Greg's book, he says you need to be an inch wide and a mile deep. So if there's 3 things that you really want to accomplish in your marriage, prioritize the priorities. Rory Vaden is a friend of mine, lives here in Nashville, and he wrote a great book, and it was called my mind's gone blank. It's I can't think of the name of the book right now. Roy's going to be mad. But anyway, you want to prioritize your priorities. Procrastinate on purpose. I knew I'd think of it. So that's the name of the book. And what he says is that you become an expert, or you're really good at those 2 or 3 things. Brian Moran lays out a great plan in the 12-week year, talking about how to focus on the task, and the goal will take care of itself. And you have these lead indicators, and you can do this in your marriage as well as project-based. Thematically, you can do this in so many ways, but it's focusing on the task and not necessarily the goal. And if you do that in your marriage and you work deliberately on that, you'll accomplish the goal. But it's just all your perspective. It's the things that are important to you. That's why you have to be an inch wide and a mile deep, because you don't have the bandwidth to do 15 things well.
Yeah, and when we focus on too many things, it just goes everywhere. Pat Flynn talks about how the riches are in the niches. So if we can find 3 shared goals in our marriage,
Yep.
then that's going to make everything else just follow right behind. So being intentional and having like Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich talks about, have a definite chief aim, which I just recently read that book, and I was like, holy cow, I wish I read this
Good.
10 years ago,
Yeah.
but I guess the timing was right. Yeah, so intentionality, that's awesome.
I love the idea of goal setting having a different meaning, especially when you think of it in early married couples, because you don't, I mean, I think in that stage of life, you're just not even thinking about goals. You just like take it one day at a time. What are we doing this minute? And you don't think 30, 40 years down the road, what do we want to work at every day to get there eventually, and to get there well? And I think what you're saying, I can't remember how you worded it, but take care of the tasks and the goal will
Take care of itself.
I think that would be
Yeah.
that's a beautiful illustration for young married couples to, or I mean for whoever, but specifically young
Right.
married couples to have that as a goal and a thing to achieve together. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking that.
No, Melanie, you brought up something that's really good too when you said that is the consistency of doing it. Consistency is our best tool, right? And what we need to do is delay gratification for the greater good later. And Robin and I took an $18,000 salary for 9 years out of our business. We didn't increase our salary, and we lived very modestly. And we had a 10-year loan when we started our business at 18 years old. I went to these guys that had money. They said, we're going to the bank and borrowing the money. We borrowed $150,000. That was in the 70s. That was a lot of money in the 70s. And when Robin and I got married, I said, Robin, we can't screw this up. We may never get this opportunity again. And so we're going to focus all of our energy and effort on this business. And every dollar we make, except for this $18,000, we're going to apply it back to the business. We paid our first business off in 36 months.
Oh my
So we were
gosh.
21 years old. We had a paid for business. And then I duplicated it again and again and again. And then when we were 27, a Fortune 500 company wanted to buy us because we'd put all the money back into the company. Now, back up 10 years. So what if we had paid that business off and we increased our lifestyle? We went out and bought a great big house, and we could have, and we could have bought a really nice car, and we could have, and we could have increased our lifestyle. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want later to be able to live like no one else, like Dave Ramsey teaches now. I didn't even know Dave Ramsey at the time, but our mindset was, let's do it right this time. And we delayed gratification. And then when I was 27, I had something that a Fortune 500 company wanted. Now, I don't say that boastfully, I say it very humbly, but be thinking in decades, not in annual. And if you do that, it'll serve you well. We started saving for retirement when I was 18. Right. Well, I'm still not ready for retirement. I'm still not at an age that I can draw the money. But see, the compound effect really takes hold. Same way in your marriage. You got to keep making these deposits. You go in and you tell your wife you're pretty, you look nice, here's flowers, here's a new little blouse I bought you. Let's go to the movies. You might get a kiss, after that. You got to keep putting deposits in. You can't just make a deposit, then a withdrawal. You got to keep putting deposits in.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I just hear your accent. It just reminds me of home, and so I think of biscuits and sausage and gravy.
Oh, hey, I'm barefooted right now. No, I'm not barefoot.
No.
I want to tell some actionable tips that we do that have really served us well. Okay, I don't want to get all mushy on here, but let me just tell you, even after 40 years almost. So we had a refrigerator delivered to our house. Ours went out. We had a new one delivered. And when they were delivering it, taking it out of the box, setting it up, the little ice maker thing fell off of the door. It's just a little thing that catches the water. And I don't know why I thought of this. Robin wasn't there. I don't know why I thought of it. I picked it up and I found a Sharpie and I wrote her a love letter underneath it on the bottom side. And, and I said, someday I may be dead, but she'll find this. So I put it in there and hooked it up, and months went by, literally months went by. And I'm standing in the closet and I'm getting dressed, and she comes walking in there, got this big grin on her face, and something's behind her back. And she comes up and she hugs me, and kisses me. And I said, I like where this is going. And she started laughing, and she brings that out. And I said, I'd forgotten it. You know what I'm saying? And listen, I couldn't have given her a diamond ring and made me happier. Put little notes and put it in their jeans pocket. Do something. Go get their car washed. Don't say anything. Fill it up with gas. I don't care what it is. Whatever her thing is, do those things and forget it, right? Don't expect a payback. And I'm just telling you, you got to date your wife. One more thing. Cancel your next interview. We're going to talk for another hour. But anyway, here's the thing. I love talking about this. I walked in one day and I gave Robin a brown paper bag. It was about 12 inches high and about 10 inches wide. And I said, you got 15 minutes. This was on a Friday afternoon. I said, you got 15 minutes. Anything you can get in this bag, you can take with you. If you can't get it in this bag, you can't take it with you. She goes, what are you saying? I said, we're going on a weekend trip. So we got in the car. She goes, 15 minutes. I said, now you got 14 minutes. And so she gets stuff. We get in the bag. We get in the car. She goes, where are we going? I said, I don't know. She goes, what do you mean you don't know? And I said, you get a quarter out. She gets a quarter out. She goes, what am I doing with a quarter? I said, you flip it. Every time we come to a stop sign, if it's heads, we'll go east. If it's tails, we'll go west. Same way with north and south. We're going to drive 2 hours. Wherever we are, that's where we're going to stay. We've done that time and time. And I'm telling you, we have so much fun. We get a bed and breakfast. We just get a pizza. We hang out there and watch movies. We don't know where we're going, right? And it's just fun, right? Be adventuresome in whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. Just have fun. See, we're too serious in our marriages today. We need to be goofy. We need to act silly. We wrestle in the floor, whatever. It's just be fun. Life is too short. Listen, when I killed that pedestrian, it gave me a whole different perspective on life. Because you or anyone listening can be taken like that in a minute. I got a friend, 52 years old, head of the school systems here in Sumner County. Amazing people. Diagnosed with cancer, stage 4 liver cancer. She's going to die. I mean, she's going to die. And I'm like, 6 months ago, perfect. Listen, we don't know when we're going to get that report. We don't know who that's going to be. We don't know when we're crossing the street. You could be killed like I did that guy. See, we don't know. And we just need to make every moment count. Because if you don't, you may miss some golden opportunities. So do silly things and have fun with your marriage.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's amazing.
So Aaron, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I heard you talking, and I immediately bought your book, and I just wanted to let you know that you've inspired me on a huge level. We do this podcast together. We're just in the throes of early starting a business. We're only about a year and a half in, and just talking to men like you who have done it and been successful and who remain humble.
Yeah.
And if I can just toot your horn for a minute, I just thank you. There's so much value in that. And I even called and left a voicemail on your cell phone, and I was just so I don't know, humbled and surprised. I was like, a busy man like this, with all these businesses, is kind enough to leave his cell phone, and that just personally goes a really long way for me, and it makes me want to pay that forward just as much as I can. And with our podcast, if we can write a book or make a podcast and it helps one marriage not get divorced, and if it gives those little kids a dad or a mom at home, then praise God, it's worth it. It really is worth it. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all y'all are doing. I know this is going to be amazing for many marriages, and I hope your audience takes heed to your wisdom and your experience and your encouragement, because the marriage is worth it. And I'm telling you, it changes generations to come, because we have children in those marriages, and the way that we're acting, our children are going to do in excess. And so you really need to pay attention how we're leading those children, and you guys are going to be amazing help for these people. So thank you.
I hope so. Thank you so much. And got anything else?
Did you have a website or any of that kind of thing that you'd like to?
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. You can contact me through viewfromthetop.com, and all of our Facebook and Twitter and everything's there. So yeah, just reach out to us. If you're interested in the book, you can get that at viewfromthetop.com/book, or you can go to any bookstore. It's on Amazon. It's in all the airports, or was in the airports. I haven't been in there recently, but yeah, check out the book. And if you're interested in belonging to a male only mastermind, that I'm going to help you become extraordinary, and so that you can be that husband to that wife and those dads to those children, check us out at Iron Sharpens Iron. You can find that at viewfromthetop.com also.
Great. And then lastly, I just wanted to know what woman is doing the masterminds for the ladies? What's her name?
Michelle Williams is her name, and she's not working for us, but we can fill up a lot of mastermind groups right now with women, but we don't provide that.
Yeah.
And so we've worked a deal with Michelle, and we're going to be sending all the women to her. So there's a lot of guys in our mastermind right now that their wives are jealous and envious. And so we said we got to come up with something. And so we're sending everybody to Michelle.
Great. Awesome. That's wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. And we don't need to take up any more of your time, but this was just really, really wonderful. And
well, I enjoyed it. Thank you. And let me know if I can ever help.
Thank you so much.